Welcome to the Smart Sales Solutions podcast, where we learn to implement intelligent solutions in a complicated marketplace with your hosts, Keith McKinney and Rich Rudnick.
Welcome, everyone, to the Smart Sales Solutions podcast. Our topic today is a hot one, and this could affect the national real estate industry as a whole and ultimately how real estate brokers get paid. So class action lawsuits are filed recently against NAR and co-defendants. And now Washington State's Northwest MLS rule changes modifying broker buyer commission rules. What's happening here? What do we need to know? So I'm your host, Rich Rudnick. Joining me is our very qualified host, Keith McKinney. So Keith, you have a long bio. I'm going to recommend people go to our website and look you up, right? But you have a 40-year background from brokerage to selling, commercial to residential. You've done a number of transactions you're looked to in the industry. Your company, Coldwell Banker Bain, has put you in a place of leadership with the commercial side. So you're very well versed in this. You're also a Smart Sales Solutions coach. So we're just so delighted to have you today to walk us through this because there's a lot. It's a very difficult topic. So we had some previous topics where we discussed how technology and discount brokers are affecting the real estate industry and how now we have these several class action lawsuits that are against NAR challenging the propriety of how commissions are paid to realtors, as if we haven't had enough challenges, right? So NAR is defending these claims vigorously, and now they're moving to dismiss the cases in court. So that's kind of where we're at. But before this has even been settled, what happens? The Seattle-based Northwest Multiple Listing Service, actually in your state, Keith, you're from Seattle, in your backyard, is now moving forward with a revised listing commissions rule to modify how their member brokers are getting paid. So now preempting what they believe will become a national issue. They're really being what they probably feel is proactive here. So Keith, what is going on here? And explain the lawsuit. So in what should we say, 5,000 words or less?
5,000 words or less. Well, first of all, thank you, Rich. This is really a hot topic for sure, and we've all read the headlines. The bombshells have sounded, but let's start with an understanding of the class action lawsuits. I mean, that was certainly where I wanted to start in taking a look at this in depth, and so let's go back and just look at a brief description of the events as they've happened. So all of this started on March 6th, 2019. Cohen, Milstein, and co-counsel filed a putative, and that's not punitive, those two are different words, a putative, i.e. being implied, antitrust class action lawsuit in the U.S. District Court, Northern District of Illinois, on behalf of home sellers who listed and sold their homes on one of 20 multiple listing services against NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and the four largest real estate broker franchisors. And those are Realogy, Remax, Keller Williams, and Home Services America, that we know as Berkshire Hathaway. The plaintiffs in this action allege that defendants, plural, conspiracy, harsh words, right? Has centered around NAR's adoption and implementation of a mandatory rule that requires all brokers to make a blanket and non-negotiable offer of buyer broker compensation, which in layperson is the buyer broker commission rule.
Okay.
This is deeply embedded in NAR's standards of practice. And I believe that buyer broker commission rule began in November of 1996. So this rule now, when listing properties on the MLS, all MLSs nationwide. So That was the allegation. Most MLSs, as we know, are controlled by local NAR associations.
Right.
So, in our area, it's the Seattle King County Association of Realtors.
Yep.
And like many others all across the United States. So these local NAR associations have access to such MLSs, are conditioned, in other words, their access and relationship with NAR is conditioned on all of their member brokers following all these mandatory rules set forth in NAR's policy, including, i.e., the infamous or now infamous or soon to be infamous buyer broker commission rule.
Okay.
So the mandatory buyer broker commission rule ensures that price competition among buyer brokers is restrained because the person retaining the buyer broker, the buyer, doesn't negotiate or pay his or her broker's commission.
Right.
Absent this rule, buyer brokers would be paid by their clients and would most likely compete to be retained by offering a lower commission or other incentives.
Right.
We've seen this certainly with some companies, rather than supporting a full service in a mutually beneficial agreement with the buyer brokers. So currently, on a national level, total broker compensation in the U.S. is typically 5 to 6%. And that 5 to 6% is split equally or more or less equally between the listing office commission, the LOC, and the selling office commission, the SOC. And so those are terms that we're going to be used here as we kind of walk our way through this.
Okay.
Largely, though, we're seeing increasingly more than half now paid to the buyer broker.
As it's coming through. All right. Layman's term. Encapsulate what you just said in a couple key points on to just connect the dots to where it is. So typically the seller pays all the commission.
Yep. Standard listing commission, is negotiated with a total commission fee, generally 5 to 6%.
Right.
Paid by the seller.
Right.
Okay. So we have a total commission paid by the seller. And so the buyer broker more or less assumes that his or her fees are coming from that selling off from the selling office as part of the listing agreement.
Sure.
And so there's been certainly some complacency, particularly on the residential side, where brokers we don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
It's already been negotiated. The listing agent negotiated all that stuff up front, and my fee and what I get paid and what my firm gets paid is all in that listing document.
Yep. Okay.
So that's the background.
So there we go. All right. So you're kind of explaining what the heart of this is. Who are the plaintiffs trying to protect?
Well, in this case, we say plaintiffs or who is trying to protect whom, and I think certainly the plaintiffs' lawyers are in this. Clearly, the sellers, though, the sellers are the plaintiffs, and at least allege that they are the injured parties. Mm-hmm. But in general, all consumers are going to be affected for this. Mm-hmm. The consumers want greater transparency and they want flexibility in the home buying and selling process. They contend that the old policies are antiquated and don't represent them fully. And largely the buyer broker's commission is dictated by the seller's listing agreement, just like we said, as a percentage of the home selling price. Buyers want more flexibility as well and transparency to negotiate buyer broker commissions that are paid in the transaction.
Okay.
So it's complex. It's a tough issue, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, a lot to swallow, and we want to really take our time through this and make sure our listeners are educated about this, because right now it's really only affecting state of Washington and really your MLS at this point, correct?
Yeah, that's right. This case is very fresh. Remember that it just began in March of this year, and we're still seeing the paperwork flying back and forth, certainly between NAR and the plaintiffs. And so the heat is building up. My sense is that this case is not going to be settled quickly. Obviously, NAR and co-defendants are digging in. Everyone's digging in. But I think there's a greater message that's going on outside of this. And if we can sort of pull ourselves out at 30,000 feet and sort of look down at this and say, to some degree, we can argue whether, who's right and who's wrong. But at the end, the consumer really has a point here. And it's probably time that we really take a closer look at all of this.
Sure. Yep, that's so good. All right. Tell us about the policy now in Washington and your MLS specifically. What kind of impact do you see on the industry from this?
Well, and again, just to be clear, there are several MLS associations in Washington State.
Yeah.
But the largest is the Northwest MLS, and that's the one that's here in Seattle.
Sure.
The Seattle King County Association of Realtors. Mm-hmm. It's this local association. But SCAR, S-K-A-R, the Seattle King County Association of Realtors, are no different than any other local NAR association that we might see across the country.
Right.
That follow these mandatory rules that are set forth in NAR's policy and their standards of practice. And remember that all of that began in 1913. So we're talking about something that's really old, even though a number of those policies have been changed certainly over the years to reflect newer market conditions. So all of this affects, this buyer broker commission rule, and that's really at the heart of this whole discussion. The Northwest MLS rule revisions, as we have now that we're looking to implement 1st of October of this year, will revise and allow real estate firms, all of the member firms, mm-hmm. and their brokers to publish the amount of commission the seller is offering to pay a broker mm-hmm. representing the buyer, this SOC, the selling office commission, on the firm's public websites, okay. along with the other listing information. So now it's out there. Now it's public. The consumer can see how much the seller is willing to pay toward the buyer broker commission, if anything.
Yep.
And so now it's all out in the open. It's not hidden behind. And so that transparency is a big part of this revision change. Making this information available to consumers will allow this transparency with regard to the buyer's broker's compensation, the fees,
yep.
and provide the consumers with additional information at the outset, at the beginning of the transaction. Sure. Everybody knows what the expectation is up front,
right.
rather than all of a sudden we're at the back end, we're trying to negotiate the deal, and the question of commissions is coming up at the end. So buyers brokers, now here's the key point.
Okay.
The buyers brokers can no longer rely on the seller paid SOC as sufficient, right. and a default, in many cases, compensation for their services. So as a result, buyers brokers are going to need to learn new skills in negotiating their fees for service, and to be able to discuss compelling reasons why they should be selected and how much they should get paid to represent their buyer.
Yeah. So, man, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of moving parts here for you. If you don't have enough going on in your business and things to navigate and process through, and not only are you overseeing a multitude of agents, you have a team, your own team. This affects you personally.
Oh yeah, it does.
Through. So what are you doing to prepare for this, and what's going on in your market with other agents and so forth?
I think with all of these, and we remember many of these other cases, the Do Not Call Registry, we thought, oh my gosh, that's the bombshell that's going to kill us. And even before that, we had the listing books that are for those who are old enough as I am to remember those things.
Yeah.
Big phone book in your trunk. And
yeah.
when that went digital, remember what happened then? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What I can't imagine, if we make this information public,
yeah.
and we're digitizing all this listing information, they're not going to call us.
Right.
Probably we're doomed,
Right.
Well, that obviously didn't happen. And the Do Not Call Registry didn't kill us either. And at the end of the day, consumers want good advocacy, and they want professionals, and they want higher levels of service. And I think we're all going to have to rise to that challenge. Our firm is certainly working very quickly to develop supplemental buyer's broker training curriculum and collateral materials, all the marketing materials. Send the message, tell the story.
Being proactive. We're being proactive.
Right? About buyer broker training, creating new manuals for our agents to use, and really to begin learning these new skills. Listing agents have learned these skills very well and are very competent in telling that story, that comprehensive story. We just have to now shift and apply those same kind of skill sets now for buyer brokers.
Absolutely. So you've been hinting at some of these other lawsuits we've had. You've been talking about that. And, I just remember 15 years ago when Do Not Call was coming out, that was like the mother of all bombs coming out, right? As far as this was the end. I mean, phone calling is done, right? And there's all these big laws. Do you know of anyone that's actually had to pay a fine for Do Not Call?
I do not. I do not. And as we
I don't either.
Yeah, no. And it has been a cumbersome issue for all of us to deal with over the years. And we all say it's going to change, it's going to get better, but all of us individually are getting bombarded every day with text messages that come in on cell phones and all over the place. So I guess where there's a will, there's a way. People will find a way to reach us one way or the other, right?
Well, but let's stay with this analogy of Do Not Call, right? Because it seemed back then that was like, it was the end of things. So contrast this, it's a different kind of lawsuit and everything else, but
very much so.
Is this the end of the realtor? Where do you see this?
And the answer,
give us some perspective for us.
The answer is no. I mean, whether this is a speed bumper or more than that, I mean, time will tell what that is, but it's certainly not going to be the end all to the industry. And the Do Not Call Registry, certainly issues seem to fade over time. I think this case, this particular class action case, is a much clearer case, honestly, to decide in the courts, and will most likely not be settled out of court. That's my own opinion, because this case largely challenges that the NAR's buyer broker commission rule. That was the one that was adapted in November of 1996 as part of their standard practice. The damages, in this claim are that the court award the plaintiff and the class a permanent injunction under Section 16 of the Clayton Act, enjoining defendants, plural, from continuing to require sellers to pay buyer brokers and from continuing to restrict competition among buyer brokers. I think that in itself is enough for other associations across the country to say, much like the MLS, the Northwest MLS, listen, we don't have to go clear to the end of the road here to see or read the music.
Right.
I'm frankly in agreement with Inman's remarks in this case, and they were that their facts are hard to dispute. NAR does have policies.
Right.
MLS does have the unilateral offer of compensation. And as Inman states, the brokers and franchisees do require their agents to become realtors. We know that's true, and join the local MLS, whether it's the Northwest MLS or others. So the MLSs nationwide are an essential utility for all of us to be in business, and none of that is all that disputable.
Well, here's something else. I think they're trying to enforce something that's already in place. I mean, it's accentuating the boxes that get checked.
That's
already, right.
It's already there. We can't dispute that.
Right. You know? So that's kind of, and I got some thoughts we'll add on this coming in. So do you see this staying within Washington, or do you see this as spreading? I mean, I think that's probably the big question.
I think my personal opinion is that MLSs across the country will also begin to change and adopt new policies and adapt to this like we adapted to everything else. Yep. We certainly adapted to digitizing our listing books and do not call registries and everything else. I think this is going to be another one of those issues that we adapt to in one way or another. It is going to be a very interesting thing to watch, I think, as it goes nationwide, and I fully expect it.
You do? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. I think just to quote our own Northwest MLS CEO, Tom Hurtlebrink, he remarks that we believe these challenges encourage member real estate firms to continue to innovate and evolve their business models to better serve consumers. I don't think I could have said that any better than that.
Well, I've talked about this beforehand. I just really see this as an opportunity. I don't see this as anything other than clarification, restating what's already there. We have the tools in there. We'll talk a little bit about it. Should make us all better as we go through, and it should be no more than a speed bump at best. What advice would you give other Washington agents, other in the country, that may be concerned about this?
We're going to hear a lot of stories and opinions on both sides of this, obviously, and we're certainly seeing that in our own office meetings. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a big teaching moment for all of us.
Yeah.
And in many ways, all of us can remember in our real estate careers how we've adapted to all of these things. I mean, for the last 30, 40 years, certainly in my case, I've been at this a while now, as you know, a little over 40 years. There have been many changes. I would strongly advise that buyers brokers, specifically buyers brokers, seek out this additional training and learn how they can be better buyer representatives on a professional level, and learn how to better explain the benefits of their agency relationship in support of their fees and their compensation. Why me? Why my fee? What am I bringing specifically to the table? When do you need me?
Yeah.
I think those are all valid conversations that we need to be having up front with our buyers. Successful listing brokers certainly have perfected these skills, as you and I know, and now buyers brokers must also learn and perfect these skills to become better buyer brokers.
I think that's well said. I just think, Keith, as we're going forward with this, we all need to up our game. And I think the opportunity for agents, whether this has come to your local MLS or not, I think get ahead of it, just like probably what the NWMLS is looking to do.
That's right.
And somebody's got to start with that, is to get yourself already disclosing and checking those right boxes, but upping your presentation skill sets, your objection handling skill sets. Here's the thing. I believe this is personal, my personal opinion on this. Most of the transactions will continue with the seller paying both sides of the commission and opting to do that if the agent is presenting everything in a position of strength, meaning if they want to get their home sold, the only option is to pay that buy side, because otherwise they're going to be reducing their exposure and the number of buyer agents that will participate.
I absolutely, human nature tells you that, right?
Right.
That if the buyer broker isn't going to get paid, and they have the option of showing or not showing that house, I think there may be a segment that chooses not to show it. And I don't think I'd want to be a seller making that decision. I just think that it's something, as you say, I don't think this is going to be a real earthquake. I think it's just something that we're going to roll with. Obviously, there are other firms that have different platforms and different marketing platforms, and they'll offer different levels of service, and that's okay. I mean, there's room here for all of us. But I think for full service firms, as you said, I think it's business as usual.
Well, and especially the stronger the agent and more established, should be easier to move them that direction. It's on value and relationships. We should only, as agents, be working, or in professionals, any professional in that matter, work with motivated sellers and buyers who value and respect us, who follow our lead and work on our schedule.
That's right.
Other than that, we shouldn't be working with those folks. And when it's outside those parameters, that's when we have the problems and challenges. So I just see this, for those who want to look at this as an opportunity, is a great one to just tighten and sharpen those skills. It's the same concept that offsets against the discount broker anyway. It really is, because it's all about
right.
Who you're going to pay. The motivated seller should want that strong agent, because it's about results, to represent them. And that's what it's all about, right? At the end.
You're right. And as in most things in life, you get what you pay for, right?
Always. And so Keith, listen, this has been great. Promise me this. Let's do another one. Let's give some time after it's rolled out to get an update.
Yes.
And maybe we'll come back and hit it again first of the year as well. So I think we're going to do at least one more of these on this. And I want to thank you.
I love the idea. And this is a topic that's going to be around for a while. It's certainly a teaching moment. And I'd love to weigh in with anybody that has any questions.
Well, listen, you're the expert on this. I mean, I've learned so much. I always do with you. And it's just amazing what you accomplish, what you're able to get done, and Laura, and that you are making yourself available to us. So I really, really appreciate that. And
appreciate it.
One of the most knowledgeable experts in the country for sure. So we will go do this. So thank you so much for listening as well. Those of you who have joined us, if you'd like more information on the NAR lawsuit or about Washington State's Northwest MLS response to the NAR class action lawsuit, we'd love to hear from you or listen back. You can click, if you're watching on YouTube, there's a comment section. Also on our blog page, there's a place for comments. You can always email in or call us, contact us, if you will, if you'd like to have a complimentary session with Keith or I just on this and growing your business, how to be prepared. Contact us. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you so much for listening, and join us on our next Smart Sales Solutions podcast. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smart Sales Solutions podcast. For more information, go to smartsalessolutions.com.